For today's classification lab, you'll need 10 objects labeled 1 through 10 with stickers or tape. And you can really use any kind of object, Happy Meal toys or office supplies or whatever you have around the house, and I used pens and pencils today. So the first thing you're going to do is spread out all of your objects, and again make sure that they are labeled and that the labels will stay on. And the first thing we're going to do is divide this group into two categories. So I decided to use click and no click writing utensils. So I'm going to divide those into my two groups. And then you're going to write that in question 1 on your lab. And then you can see for number 2 that we divided the all by clicks and doesn't click. Okay, now we're going to take our first group and we're going to divide that again into two groups by one trait. So here my groups are going to be pens and pencils. And so on my dichotomous key tree here, I'm going to divide my clicks into pens and pencils. And then I'm going to divide the pens further into red and blue. And the pencils will be divided again into two groups, green and not green. And then my not green pencils will be divided into black and clear. And then I'm adding that to the tree. This is my finished tree. Obviously yours isn't finished yet, but you can see how I've been doing it. And then you're just going to take your other group and finish sorting. Again, two groups every time. So I have permanent markers and not permanent markers. And then I'm going to divide my permanent markers into red and black, and my not permanent markers into pens and pencils, and my pencils then into green and white. And you'll know you're finished when each object is separate. Okay, now you're going to take your tree that we just finished and you are going to make a key out of it. So the first part of my key is a choice between clicks or doesn't click, because that was my first characteristic. And then if the object clicks, it's going to have to be divided further. So I said go to 2. And the next one, the go to, I left blank because you'll want to fill that in a little bit later as you continue to make your key. So I followed all of those down until I had just the item numbers of those individual items left. And this is my finished key. Again, this is an example. Yours will look a little different. But you'll know that you're finished when all of your items have been individually identified. And then your key is done. The next part of the lab worksheet tells you to make up Latin names. If you know Latin, great. If you don't, just make some up for your individual objects. And then you're going to transfer your key that you made, but instead of putting your item numbers, you're going to include those Latin names. And that key should be transferred to a separate piece of paper so that you can hand it to someone else and they won't be able to see all of the work that's gone into making the key. So this is my rewritten key. You can see that I have the individual object Latin names on there instead of the item numbers. And I'm going to hand this to a partner or a parent or a friend and give them the 10 objects and see if they can use the key to identify the names of each of the objects. And if you have any issues with that or they have problems, then you'll want to record that on your worksheet as well. And that is where we'll stop with our classification lab. You should have learned a lot about making dichotomous keys today.